Go. Welcome to the PRCA Views Podcast, the podcast for people in and around the PR and comms industry. Now, AI slop, the enshittification of social media platforms, publisher fragmentation, there's a lot happening in the world of digital and digital comms, and audiences are changing as well. What impact is this having? How should we respond as PR professionals? Well, we are joined this week by Partikas and Platts from FleishmanHillard's digital team, who have been doing some research into digital fragmentation. We cover some fascinating findings from their 200 interviews, as well as some quantitative research as well. And there's a lot to take away from this. So next half hour, strap in and enjoy. Thank you for joining us on the PRCA Views Podcast. Here we have Partikas and Platts from FleishmanHillard's digital team. To kick off, would you mind introducing yourselves? Tell us a bit about who you are, what you do.
Yes, so I'm Partikas and I'm in the digital team at Fleischman in London. And I have 15 years experience. I started off my career, like most PR people these days, starting off in traditional press office, big media relations campaigns, and then I've moved in to have a focus on digital strategies. So now I really focus on working with large global organizations on their digital strategies, such as in the energy sector and in the healthcare and pharmaceutical space.
Amazing.
Great. And I'm Platts. I'm also a director in our digital team with 15 years experience across the social and digital landscape. I specialize in integrated digital campaigns, but also guiding crisis response and reputation building as well in the digital space as well. For the past 6 years, I've been focusing more in the health tech space, but my previous experience extends well beyond healthcare into automotive, consumer goods, tech, and executive profiling.
So safe to say you're both quite experienced when it comes to the world of digital.
Yes.
And it's an interesting landscape in terms of communications, because there's a lot going on into there. You guys have actually been doing some research, which you're going to share with us as podcast into digital fragmentation. Could you tell us, just top line, what have you looked into?
Yeah, of course. So essentially, we've been digging into the behavioural shift behind audiences fragmenting across platforms online and really delving into why we're seeing this rapid growth across platforms that are built around those niche communities like Substack, Discord, and Reddit.
Okay. And so it's an interesting field. What's prompted you to do this? Was there like was there like a moment when you thought, oh, okay, there's some behavior change happening here? Was there like a client that came to you with this, or was it just something you were witnessing scrolling through your own feeds?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily one client in particular. It was definitely something that we were just seeing as a team as we started to look at kind of where we wanted to target audiences or how we wanted to target audiences for our clients. We were noticing, well, actually, for example, there's a huge increase in Substack usage across the UK and US. And that kind of prompted us to start looking into actually where else are audiences other than those mainstream platforms. So whilst platform fragmentation isn't exactly a new conversation, we wanted to make sure that we were developing a report that didn't just focus on the metrics of where the attention's shifting to, but we really wanted to understand the reason why. So why are audiences doing this? What's kind of fueling that? And then also where are they actually going to, so that we can try and provide more value to our clients.
Yeah, I mean, from my own perspective, I certainly see from the media side of things, some of my favorite reporters in the national newspapers writing their own Substacks, and you're getting a lot more from following them and also creating more content on social media. And I'm sure we'll go into this later on as well. But so how did you go around doing this research? What's the methodology you've adopted to create this research?
Yeah, sure. So we really wanted to conduct a really strong piece of qualitative research across the four main audiences our clients look at. So that's Gen Z, healthcare professionals, IT decision makers, and also executive management. So this report really couldn't have happened without our in-house intelligence team called True Global Intelligence. They conducted around 200 interviews, online chat-based interviews, with the four audiences across the UK and the US. So all of the data kind of encompasses both UK and US audiences. And these were then all organised and analysed to identify those key themes that we have in the report. And then on top of that, we also conducted secondary research to make sure that we could put some hard data numbers behind the insights we were finding.
So it's qual and quant. So this team you have then, they were literally sat there having 200 conversations on a chat with different audiences.
Yes, and they were also using a partner called AI Focal Data, I believe it was called, to also help support that as well. So yeah, then we have like 200 interviews all printed out in PDFs, all organised and analysed to try and work out what the insights are,
That sounds like a major undertaking. And I'm fascinated to hear, what are the key findings from this?
So looking at the key themes that have come out of it, what we've really seen is that what on the outside looks like chaos in digital audience behavior is actually really ordered and orderly. And there is this hidden logic behind the fragmentation. So it's not the audiences are randomly scattering across the platform. It's that they're really deliberately engineering their own information ecosystems. And this is in response to 5 converging forces and the shifts that we're seeing that came out so strongly across our research with all of the audiences. And so, yeah, if you're happy, we can start to take you through these 5 shifts that we've seen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Talk us through.
Great. So the 5 forces of fragmentation. So first of all, the audiences that we spoke to, we had Gen Z, C-suite, IT decision makers, and HCPs, so healthcare professionals. And we really looked at what is actively reshaping how and where they're engaging online. So they came out with these 5 unifying factors across all of the audiences. And our research really shows that these forces that are driving these shifts, no matter what the audience is, whether it is the professional audience or the demographic audience, it's really clear that it is central themes across how everyone is using digital platforms now.
So you're finding like a commonality between Gen Z and healthcare professionals?
Yeah, well. Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously there's broader factors such as, geopolitical climate and other things that are happening that would be contributing and, information overload, for example. But yeah, we've seen these 5 forces come through really strongly.
But before we get into that, that's also quite interesting, isn't it? Because it feels like, I guess, like healthcare marketing or B2B marketing previously was based on the idea that you live within your professional self. But actually what you're doing is taking a much more holistic view of that audience and thinking, where are you consuming stuff, with your Substacks, Instagram as well as LinkedIn, right?
Absolutely. And whenever we look at digital strategies and creating that, it is something we have a lot of conversations with our clients about and with each other, of just that simple thing of reminding each other that, even though someone might be a cardiologist, they're also maybe a dad or a mum, and they also have, these other hobbies in their lives. So absolutely, it's about remembering that the audiences aren't always completely discrete and separate, and that people have different parts of themselves. So of course, naturally, when we looked at the behaviors, there is going to be similarities across the board because people are multifaceted and, show up in different places and of course use digital platforms in similar ways.
Yeah, well, take us through the first one. What have you got up for?
Great. So the first one, which won't be a surprise to any comms pros listening, but the trust recession is what has come through really clearly. And due to factors such as the increase in AI-generated content, that algorithmic manipulation from the key social platforms, knowing that they're all competing with each other to make sure that people spend as much time as possible on their platforms, the growth of, unverified sources, and also the declining confidence in the traditional media outlets. All of these are coming together to drive audiences away from what they see as untrusted sources. And then they're moving towards being part of communities that have, peer moderation, where professional credentials are really important. So exactly, who is posting and what is their point of view, why should I believe what they're saying? And also where there's, transparent governance in how these communities work. And one of the stats that we came across that was part of our secondary research to back up all of these interviews that we did was 94% of UK adults have witnessed misinformation on social media at least once. And that's saying people that have seen it and they have noticed, think of all the other times that maybe they've seen it and actually haven't noticed. So it's something that lots of people are really starting to notice and to think about. And an example of where we've kind of seen this come to life in our day-to-day client work A big global consulting firm that we work with, we run over 30 executive profiling programs globally for them. So it's a mix of global and local market-focused execs across different sectors and different specialties. And the program includes thought leadership, spotlighting corporate news from their perspective, sharing relevant events and other key moments, and, of course, sharing their own expert point of views because they've got into their roles because they are brilliant and experts in what they do. And as part of us creating this content program and always on content engine, we know it's so clear to have the sources behind what we're talking about, whether it's a new trend or new technology or an observation of what is happening in a certain part of the world, because we know that because of this trust recession, if people aren't being clear about the content and what they're talking about and where it comes from, they will get called out.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense to me. Like when I look through my feed, you can see some stuff which is just very clearly AI generated and is absolute like misinformation, sometimes disinformation. I remember I was in the office earlier on this week, and someone in the office had her head in her hands and she was on the phone to her dad saying, "No, Dad, that's AI generated. He wouldn't say that, would he?" And you can see that absolute trust recession is as what you say. Very good. And what's the second finding?
Sure. So the second force is all around platform bloat, which is where we're starting to see how users are really simplifying their digital environments in response to platforms really trying to do everything all at once. So Meta is a perfect example for this because Reels was created to compete against TikTok. Threads was originally positioned as like the new X. And now even the steps to uploading a simple image can include adding music, polls, prompts, AI captions as well. So rather than actually enhancing the user experience on platforms, this kind of feature creep is adding unnecessary complexity to like really simple tasks, and users are finding that very overwhelming.
Oh, totally. I mean, I remember when Stories was first introduced to Instagram, and there were all these memes coming up saying like, "Oh, Excel is now introducing Stories as well." You can see that everyone's trying to do everything all at once, and it is really overwhelming, isn't it? Really overwhelming.
Exactly. And we even had like Gen Z respondents as well, who are typically used to managing between 4 to 8 platforms on a daily basis, relay that too many functions is overwhelming. And audiences are really trying to combat that by moving to specialized platforms and really kind of, I guess, organizing the platforms they use by purpose. So Discord they use for community-based conversations, Substack for content, Reddit for validation, and LinkedIn for professional visibility as well.
And this is a UK-US study that you've done.
Yes.
Are there variations within that? Because you don't really hear too many people talk about Discord in the UK at the moment. But
yes. So we actually did have UK examples for Discord as well. So that definitely is starting to now increase within the UK. And also what was really interesting to see as well was Reddit was probably primarily used in the US about 6 months ago. And so UK audiences weren't using it as much as the US. But then our findings and the qualitative research showed that actually in the UK, it's really starting to kind of have a bit of a boom as well, which is fantastic because that's kind of where you can get kind of unfiltered unfiltered conversations around different topics, and also people kind of being more verified as well with what they're saying.
And we're seeing it's becoming more influential in LLMs as well because of the deal between Gemini being able to train on Reddit data. It's influencing a lot of those results as well, right?
Definitely, yes. So that's what we're also speaking to our clients about. We're really trying to speak to them about actually how can they improve their LLM visibility and where do they need to be going to. So part of that is actually looking at conversations on subreddits to see actually what's being said about them and actually what's being pulled out and being served up as responses on LLMs as well. So that's a conversation we're also having. And obviously LinkedIn as well. I think like some research came out over the past week or so where, and Chloe Partikas, you might know a bit more about this, but where LinkedIn was also becoming now one of the top sources as well for LLMs.
Absolutely. And an interesting thing that has come out of the data as well is LinkedIn articles are really being rewarded by the LLMs, which is interesting because work with our clients, we'd started to kind of move a bit away from having the LinkedIn articles included in their programs. They weren't doing that well. And then suddenly, classic social media, right? Oh, okay, we've got some new data. These are really important again. Okay, off we go. Keeps things fresh. But we're seeing that these kind of longer articles, because it kind of comes back to things being sourced and being able to explain the topic in more detail, are having a really positive influence on the LLM visibility.
Wow, I did not know that. We've I've been looking at some sources myself using various different tools and seeing where the citations are, and I remember at the beginning of all of this, some people were coming out saying news editorial is responsible for 80% of citations. That does not tally at all with what I'm seeing in my research. I know we're going on a bit of a tangent, but I'd love to get your take on this.
We have these chats every day. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
You've hit a soft spot.
YouTube's also one of the primary sources for LLMs as well. So we're finding that YouTube, and that's really because of the metadata as well, and the captions and everything like that. It's really easy for LLMs to kind of pull that information, and especially, of course, with YouTube's partnership with Gemini as well. So that's also what's fueling that too.
Yeah. Well, okay, we're straying a bit. It's fascinating. Let's get back to your report. Third, so platform bloat, second finding, or force. Third force.
Yes. So the third force that came through loud and clear is that social gravity now outweighs platform gravity. And what we mean by that is that audience are starting to pull away deliberately from, the biggest or the most established channels. So they might be on there, but they're not spending all of their time on the biggest channels anymore. But when they are on there, they're looking to follow trusted individuals, trusted communities, not, organizations and brands for the sake of it. And, of course, we know that just because, our clients want to be somewhere, it doesn't mean they have the right to have our audience's attention. But actually, if anything, it's more important now to make sure that we're thinking about the individuals that we're working with and that we're working with trusted ones. And, we know that the algorithm and what it wants to serve up today isn't going to replicate what peer endorsement can do in a few seconds. So we also really understand that, and it's so important now. And one of the stats that we came across in our secondary research was, social media reach has plateaued. Monthly active users on the large social platforms, it's kind of at its peak now. Most people that would be on there are on there already, but the engagement within these closed communities, such as Chloe has touched on, and the peer networks are continuing to grow. And when we looked at how this came to life in the research, we heard from really all the audiences about this point clearly. On the C-suite side, one of the quotes was around how they're spending time in private Slack groups for chief data officers, where they get this candid feedback from peers. And also it's natural to want to hear from other people that are in a similar role as you and to get their advice, of course. And that real decision-making intelligence is coming from closed communities where these executives can be honest with each other. So they're kind of acting as, real-time intelligent networks where they can discuss hot topics and get feedback and advice. And then looking at, for example, Gen Z, we're seeing that they've really engineered their own follow economy. So rather than just passively accepting the feeds, and we know Gen Z is quite skeptical, they're really selectively following micro influencers, niche creators, and people they actually feel a bit of an affinity with to curate their own cycle of influence. And, of course, being really smart and strategic in how they're engaging with digital platforms. And then a third audience that we saw this from was that the IT decision makers are making really critical technology decisions, again, similar to the C-suite, based on confidential feedback from peers in these hidden forums.
And so it's about being more closed, more selective, curating what you see more. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And being really thoughtful about the platforms where you're spending time and putting effort into, depending on which audience you're working with and that you want to engage.
That's fascinating. And I think a question for you based on that force and the force before about platform bloating, do you think, and hopefully this won't get you into trouble with any of the big platforms, do you think that this is due in part to the end-shitification of social media platforms?
I can go first. I think absolutely. People are feeling a bit a bit cheated, I guess. They've spent all this time being on platforms, Instagram, for example, and the standard, I just want to see my friends' posts. I don't want 75 suggested posts, posts, in my feed, and that you have to be kind of a high usage user to know to be able to go up the top and click on the following feed, right? I think that's a perfect example. It's like people are starting to feel a bit, cheated from the time they're spending on social and lacking trust in the social platforms. And I think it makes sense as an end user. Of course, people are starting to wonder, why am I spending time on these platforms? Things are changing all the time. I just want to be here and connect with my friends. Yeah. And if you'd have anything to add to that, Chloe.
So I was also going to say something that came up in the findings as well from the report was a lot of audiences touch base on algorithm manipulation. So when they're actually starting to go onto their For You feed at the very beginning, or as their For You feed, for example, isn't actually really reflecting their core interests anymore. I don't know. I personally found that I go onto that and I'm starting to look at it and be like, I'm definitely not searching for any of this content. And that's something else that I think is kind of really putting audiences off remaining on these platforms. And it just adds to the content overload. It's kind of doom scrolling. It's not really adding any value to those audiences or, actually the general population, not even probably just our 4 audiences that we're looking into. And they're starting to say, actually, my time is precious and I want to spend, time on the platforms where I'm actually getting something out of this and getting something that I value from this, which also kind of leads very nicely into our fifth force, but I'll jump into that in more detail in a bit.
I also, it ties back to your first one, trust recession, right? There's a lack of trust in the algorithm to say what you really want. But I'm fascinated. Let's hear the 4th force from you guys.
Great. So our 4th force that came through was authenticity sensitivity. And what we mean by this is what used to pass as credibility is now really under the microscope. And as the audiences grow more skeptical, they're taking their time and their attention credits away really intentionally, relocating to these spaces, as we have touched on before, where, the verified expertise and the real human voices dominate. And the highly produced content can read as potentially manipulated or AI manipulated, as we discussed. And author credentials are being really cross-checked. If people are reading or watching videos about healthcare information, they're really looking at, why should I believe this? And so the audiences are moving into these spaces where inauthenticity is harder to hide, such as gated communities that have credential requirements or peer-moderated forums. And from our research and a lot of our my day-to-day work as well with our clients, we really see that a key example where this comes to life is the healthcare professional audience. They're congregating on these clinical specific platforms such as Sermo, Doximity, UpToDate, therapy area specific platforms such as ones dedicated to oncology or cancer research. And it's here where that peer experience is verified and the misinformation is professionally moderated, because when they go there, what they see, the information that they need to get, they need it quickly and it has to be accurate so they can get on with their days.
That's fascinating, because it feels like we've reached peak automation and that's just created loads and loads of content which is untrustworthy, and now we're going back to real humanity, real relationships. I know this person because I have written this in the past, and we're looking for the humanity in all of this information. And I can totally get on board with that. I see that day to day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the final force.
Sure. So the final force is all around how self-curation is the new survival skill. So that's really like a knock-on effect of all of the other kind of forces we've spoken about, but also the individual audience factors as well that we have in the report. So we have these 5 forces that we've discussed, but then we also delve into a couple of individual factors for each audience as well. And so this really kind of brings everything together, because like we've been saying, in a world where there's more platforms and more content than anyone can really consume, people are really trying to protect their time, protect their mental well-being as well, and make sure that they are validating content sources with peers and verified content as well. Yes.
Go, carry on.
I was just going to say, so as Chloe mentioned, for example, with healthcare professionals, they're really looking to just seek out information that they need at the time, rather than being completely overloaded with brand new clinical information across absolutely every single therapy area you can think of. So that's why they're kind of using these trusted and specialized sources like PubMed and Medscape and UpToDate, and then supplement that with the kind of peer exchange on Sermo, and then also Doximity, which is a US specific platform too. They're becoming increasingly selective about where they spend time online, but then also looking at the C-suite audience as well. So this is an audience that, again, is really pressed for time, and their platform selection needs to be really strategic in how they kind of actually consume content, and they want to make sure that it's providing a maximum return of attention too, because they do have such limited time. So one example that we find with one of our largest kind of clients, which is in the energy sector, rather than scrolling through lots and lots of different social feeds in the morning, they'll just spend a couple of hours really kind of focusing on a couple of key publications. So whether that's like the Politico Playbook newsletter or the FT Energy Source, they're really making sure that they're up to date in a very efficient, curated and accurate way.
And that's really interesting to hear, because it feels like actually the large publishing brands like the FT are catering to that through their newsletters and their briefings in the morning as well.
Absolutely.
And so, and you're seeing so what you're saying is actually this is going to become more important in future.
Absolutely. And you also see it, for example, the reason why Substack is so great for these audiences is because you can sign up and you're just getting the information directly to your email. You're not having to go off and search for it. You're not having to scroll through a feed to try and get the information you want. It lands right in your inbox as soon as someone has published something new. And this is being used, that's kind of why this platform is so great for these kind of key professional audiences as well. But that's also what we're starting to see as well across kind of other mainstream media platforms too.
And that's amazing as well, because, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, people were talking about the death of the email.
Yeah. It's coming back.
The 90s are back. So what does this mean broadly for PR practitioners and your clients?
Yep. So some clear things we've been discussing of, taking this into our day-to-day and all of the listeners' day-to-day. The first one is about, it's really important to be participating in these platforms. The era of be on all platforms is not anymore. We know that it's important to do that deep dive audience research, do the audience mapping, make sure you really understand where are my audiences spending time online, what does their day look like, and then pick, 3 to 4 communities or spaces where your audiences are already there and participate authentically in these spaces, or just, listen so that you're gathering insights to continue to learn more about how they're behaving online. And then we touched on authenticity a lot today, but, authenticity really is now your competitive advantage, no matter what type of comms you're doing or what channels you're on or platforms. And we know with that highly produced content triggering skepticism, it's about, and I have these conversations with my clients every day, becoming more comfortable with just posting that raw, authentic, human-centered, behind-the-scenes content, because actually that's what gets the cut through now, because it's more believable, as it should be, such as having like your C-suite or different people in the organization at a key event. Make sure that you're sharing that raw, behind-the-scenes, in-the-moment content, because that's what's actually driving trust and maintaining it from your key audiences, and it helps you show up as, authentic and, willing to be transparent about what you know, and also being transparent about what you don't know as well, which I think is very different to how we used to approach PR back in the day, when it was all about, getting the perfect message out there. It's about showing that full spectrum and being human. And then the third thing that we really recommend to everyone is just the influencer strategies have to adapt. We've touched a lot on micro communities and individuals being trustworthy, but it's about thinking about, who is the peer authorities that my audiences trust? It might be smaller people that have 2,000 followers on LinkedIn, but you see that they're really engaged. There's incredible conversations and very passionate conversations happening on the LinkedIn comments feed. And that's actually more important than those kind of broader loads of followers influencers. So really just tailoring your influencer approach and thinking of who you're working with so that it is vetted peers, really. And then lastly, of course, measurement needs to change. It needs to evolve. Think about, it's not just about reach and impressions, as we all know, but it's about, measuring trust in those trusted communities, and are you earning credibility within these forums or groups or platforms, and how are you being referenced by peers in those networks, because that has to just be such an important KPI for all of us now as we're crafting our programs and campaigns for our clients and the work that we're doing day to day.
I mean, that's really, really fascinating, very, very useful as well. I mean, because so often when you receive a brief, it's like, we want to get, we need to get 5 national hits, or it's not a success. And you can turn around and say, oh, well, actually, where are you really going to make an impact?
Exactly.
Maybe it's a mix of that and something else.
Yeah, how can you actually get that cut through when you're thinking about what do we want our audience to, think, feel, or do, if it's going to impact what they're thinking about when they go on their walk, when they close their laptop at the end of the day through a closed audience, that might actually have more impact. Absolutely.
And presumably you're using this information and data to shape your own service offering as well.
Absolutely, yes.
And what you're doing.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So where can people go to find out more? And I must tell listeners, we're recording this at the moment before this is published, so you might not have a website address. But if any of the listeners wanted to go somewhere to find out more, where can they go?
So on our FleishmanHillard UK LinkedIn page is the best place to go. Once the report goes out, we'll have content going out there regularly, and we'll have a link through to the full report that you'll be able to download and save and have a read of.
Great. I'm going to go give that a follow right now. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.